everyone, and welcome back to Tea and Lit. In today's video, we are going to be doing our author spotlight for the great William Shakespeare. Very excited to be getting into this with you guys, so please grab yourselves a cup of tea and have a seat, and let's chat about William Shakespeare. So one of the things that I found really interesting when doing research about William Shakespeare is how little that we actually know of him. I've checked out several books from the library, I've checked out several articles online, and I've watched several documentaries, and there's just a lot of limited information about who William Shakespeare was as the man. We obviously know quite a bit about him as the playwright, and I think that a lot can be said about him based on his work. Taking a class on William Shakespeare, we talk about the historical and biographical reading of his work specifically in biographical and historical context and why that's actually really important. I'll be doing a separate video about why you should do some reading, very cursory research on the author of whatever book you're reading and how it's relevant, but basically the gist of that thought process is that every artist is leaving a little bit of themselves in their art, and that is the case across art mediums, whether it's literature or music or paintings or anything, a little bit of the artist. I mean, even in sport, like you see, if you watch sports closely, you see that a lot of the top level athletes will have their own flair on what they're doing. They're putting a little piece of themselves into their work. And so I think that being aware of the author's biography, even on a basic level, is super important. And I think that as dark academics, that's something that we would be attracted to doing anyway. And so, yeah, just a cursory Google search can do a lot of good. So some fast facts about William Shakespeare: we do not know the date he died, or the date he was born, actually, which is kind of fascinating, but we don't know. We do know his baptism day, and so we can kind of guesstimate the time of his birth. His death and his birth are celebrated on 4/23. He was born in 1564, I think. Part of the reason that his birthday is celebrated on 4/23 is that is the feast day of St. George, who is the patron saint of England, and William Shakespeare, who has had arguably the most impact on the English language and the English culture. He is also England's national poet. So it makes sense that England would give him, that his birthday would be celebrated on a feast day of the patron saint of the country. His date of death was 4/23/1616. His baptism was on 4/26, so that's why you kind of can estimate that timeline. He was born in Stratford upon Avon, which is in England. It's right close to it's considered the countryside, I think, or it was at the time considered the countryside, so he definitely had a foot in the urban environment of London and a foot in the countryside. He did retire to the countryside later in his life, and if you see in his works, it seems that he has an affection for the common people. It's not even in his writings of kings and queens and dukes. He definitely has a keen understanding of the common people, and has to do with his upbringing. He was first published around 1592, and it was his work Henry VI, Part 1. So that is that. He has had his works performed more than any other playwright, partially, I'm sure, because of how much he has. His works are extensive, and my collection is weak. And so I will be doing a video a little bit later about or it might be up, I don't know. If it is, I'll post it. The collection of the classic literature that I have, and there's an entire section on Shakespeare, and it is definitely limited. There are tons of works, and the thing is, he didn't just write the plays, he also wrote several poems, and so I have none of those. I need to get his sonnets collection. He wrote at least 37 plays, the collection of sonnets, and established the Globe Theatre and transformed the English language. So much of our English language is actually based on William Shakespeare. And things that we don't realize are things that he came up with. So let me Google it. I did write a whole thing on it for my class, and now I can't remember any of them. Also, in each of the plays, if there's anything that I think in any of the plays when we go through them, I'll say, like, this is something that Shakespeare said. Green-eyed monster to describe jealousy is something that he came up with. Lackluster he came up with in As You Like It. Gloomy, gossip, mimic, outbreak, gnarled, grovel, deafening, discontent, equivocal. These are words that Shakespeare came up with. So he's the wordsmith of all wordsmiths. Now, I find it really interesting because sometimes when I think about making up words, I think of Dr. Seuss. And so I wonder how many words that Dr. Seuss came up with in, 500 years are going to work their way into the English language permanently, which would be really interesting. Just on a point of note for the Globe Theater, if you have the opportunity to go to the Chicago Shakespeare Theater, it is based on the Globe Theater, and it is so intimate, so beautiful, and I've only seen one play there, but I can't wait to go back and see more. He was born about 100 miles northwest of London, and he was baptized on 4/26, 1564. I mentioned how his birthday is traditionally celebrated on the day of his death, which is the feast day of St. George, which is 4/23. He died in 1616, born in 1564. His father's name was John, and he seemed to be like a jack of all trades. He did a lot of work. Most notably, he was basically the mayor of Stratford-upon-Avon. There's another word for what he did, but basically the mayor, but he also did some farming work, some leather work, money lending. He did a lot of different things. His mother's name was Mary Arden. She was the daughter of a landowner, and so John marrying her definitely raised his status a little bit. They may have been Catholic. There's some disputing evidence. It was during a time when to have any religious affiliation in England was going to cause you to burn. It was the first Elizabethan era, just after the Bloody Mary period, and so, to be Protestant would be to burn under Mary, but to be Catholic would be to burn under Elizabeth. So, we don't exactly know what he was. We do know that he was number 3 of 8 children. 3 of them died in childhood, so he was raised with lots of siblings. A little bit later in his life, when he was 18, he married Anne Hathaway, not the same Anne Hathaway as the Batman Anne Hathaway. She was 8 years older than him, and it's thought to be a shotgun wedding because she was pregnant at the time. His daughter, Susanna, was born 7 months after the wedding, in February 1585, and it seems that he loved her very, very, very dearly. He also had a son named Hamnet, who is thought to be the inspiration for the play Hamlet, which we will be reading later, and he died at the age of 11. If you're interested in reading Hamlet with us, then please go down and click the subscribe button so you can be, up to date when we do read Hamlet, and I look forward to going through that play. I think it's my brother's favorite one. You'll notice we say that about a lot of them, though. He left home and pursued his creative ambitions in London. So for the vast majority of their marriage, Shakespeare wasn't home. Anne stayed at home to raise the children, and Shakespeare went down to London to pursue his dreams of being a playwright. He was there as an actor, he was a bard, he was a writer, obviously, and then he set up the Globe Theater. So he did a lot of work in London and stayed away from home for a very long time. It's something that I don't think would translate very well into a modern marriage, but it worked for them apparently because they died married. He retired back home to Anne, and she just waited for him, which I guess is nice. There's a lot of conspiracy surrounding William Shakespeare because he seemed to have so much knowledge of so many different things. Seems like he was very well traveled, that he had a good idea of what other cultures were like, about what his own culture was like at the different social stratifications. It seems that he had this expansive knowledge, and because of that, there is some conspiracy around it. Was he some aristocrat, some duke who did all this writing from what he had seen? Was he multiple people? And the works were all just compiled. And even the images we have of William Shakespeare are not the most accurate. There are only, the book I said, there's only 2 that survive from near the time when he was alive. And so all the images of Shakespeare that we have are just copies of those representations that we think may be of William Shakespeare, we're very limited in our knowledge of William Shakespeare, which is absolutely shocking, especially for, you know, some people who are attracted to the dark academia lifestyle, because we very much want to acquire knowledge and get to the bottom of things. And it seems like William Shakespeare is not something that we can get to the bottom of. We can read his works and learn so much of him from reading his works, but there's so many things that we will just not know, all the way down to his birth. 400 years later, we still don't know the exact date that he was born, which is amazing. He seemed to have way too much understanding of politics and geography and culture to have been, you know, just some poor country boy. But a lot of the works that he did were based on other works, which I found so fascinating. So he took inspiration from other writers' works that are obviously not as prevalent as his works are to us today. And so it's really interesting to see, you know, we have that expression, there's nothing new under the sun since Shakespeare. And in my book, I wrote about how there's nothing new under the sun since the Bible. And it seems that he used other works as an inspiration and built upon the stories. For example, Romeo and Juliet was based on another work written by a Venetian. And so to see that the greatest poet and the greatest playwright of all time was enhancing the works of other artists, I think is something that's really interesting to think about, because we think about these groundbreaking, you know, definers of history, and really every moment has just been a build upon of the last thing. You know, Elon Musk couldn't be anything without Nikola Tesla. You know, you think about that sort of thing, how every bit builds on something else. And Shakespeare's no different, but I think that we sometimes think him as a breakout artist, and really in so many ways he was taking inspiration from these artists, these works of art that already existed. He started acting in 1594 with the Lord Chamberlain's men's troupe, and he worked with other members of that troupe to establish the Globe Theatre, which is still open today. I would love, if I ever get to London, by the grace of God, if I ever get to the United Kingdom, first of all, I probably might never leave, but I would love to see the Globe Theatre and see a performance live there, because they just look so amazing. He retired in 1612, as I mentioned. He went back home to his wife Anne and his children. He had another daughter, so there was Susanna, and I think his other daughter's name was Elizabeth. His poems may not have been meant to be published, his sonnets. He wrote his first poem in 1593 because the Globe Theatre was closed during a plague, which is so appropriate. I just want to say that as we are navigating the current plague, to know that calculus was created during a plague, the poems, the sonnets of William Shakespeare were created during a plague. This is a time of great creativity, and so I can't wait to see what everybody has come up with during this time. His sonnets were first published in 1609, and it's thought that some friends of his published them first, and that he had written them as things to share with his friends and family, and not so much as something to be put out to the public. Upon his death, he was buried, and it said that he was the one who wrote the quote on his tombstone, which says, "Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be the one that moves my bones." And I just think that is so funny to say, and it is actually what has kept us from digging him up and doing some archaeological evaluation of him, of his remains. And I wonder about that time period. I'd like to do some more reading on it, because I know Queen Elizabeth, in her passing, she said that she didn't want an examination of herself, and that led to conspiracy theory about, was she intersex, was she actually a boy, you know, what were all these things. And so I wonder what culturally dictated that people did not want their remains fiddled with. I mean, I guess I say that. I don't want my remains fiddled with. Let this be my final will and testament. When I go, please just leave me be. And don't touch me. But I just find it interesting that both of them in that time period were very keen on that. So that is the author spotlight for William Shakespeare. And if you have any more information, please write it in the comments below. I would love to know more about him, but as I said, there's just legitimately limited information on him because of lost to history. I mean, it's amazing. You've got people nowadays that are semi-famous and their, you know, old high school friends come out and talk about stuff. We all put everything on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram anyway, and so I think it's really interesting that we just have such limited information about him, and so much of what we know about William Shakespeare is probably what we can pick up through his plays, which is great, beautiful, but also sad. So that is our author spotlight for William Shakespeare. If you enjoyed it, please give us a vote. Even if you didn't enjoy it, please give us a vote. Write in the comments below any information that you have about William Shakespeare and what your favorite play is of his, and we will be sure that we read it at some point together. Click subscribe. Othello is out, and Julius Caesar I am filming today, so that will be out eventually also. And again, I did my classics list, which I'll post a card in the description box. So you can see what books that I have of his so far. Also, in the description box we have fun t-shirts, cool mugs, and laptop cases with various Shakespeare quotes. You can check those out also. And thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.